let's get all kicked off with the show this evening. So we are going to open with what is an obvious topic, obviously, in our headline. And also we announced it yesterday what we were going to open with and base the show around, I suppose. I mean, it's a quarterback show. This show is going to be a quarterback show. Sorry, spoiler alert to anyone who's watching. We are going to be talking about 3 quarterbacks because they're so interesting at the moment within the league. And like Johnny said, it's been a bit of a brutal weekend for the league. And it's even more brutal news for today for Bryce Young, quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. It's been announced today that he is going to be benched for their week 3 game. Has played in the last 2 games, lost 47-10 to open the season to the Saints and lost 26-3 over the weekend against the LA Chargers. 245 yards, 3 interceptions for the former Alabama quarterback so far this season. Obviously, Andy Dalton, a quarterback we all know. Don't necessarily know if we all know and love, but we all know at least. It's been a torrid time for Bryce Young. It's been a torrid time this whole time. But James, what was your sort of first initial thoughts when this announcement got made public? Today, really. Well, yesterday / into today.
It's really hard to not think fair enough, to be honest, because the play has just been so bad. It feels more dangerous to leave him in. I feel sorry for him, to be fair. I really do feel sorry for him. And I was listening to an interesting thing that sort of came up again on social media from Brady from a couple of years ago. And he was talking about the transition from college into the NFL. And he was saying that colleges used to be programs whereby you go in at the 7th level, you know, you're the 7th quarterback because you're starting out super young, and you learn about how to become a professional. And then eventually you become the number 3, and then eventually you might get to become the number 1. And during that time, you've learned how to learn, you've gone through a playbook, you've gone through different systems and different schemes, you've been taught how to read the opposition. And then when you transition into the NFL, you feel like you've got a good setup and a good foundation to then be able to walk into a new franchise, a new team, and take what you've learned and input it there. And just obviously you've got to learn a new playbook and stuff, but you've sort of been exposed to a lot already. Now you are part of a team at the college level, and that team has to win straight away. So you go in and they may scheme a few things around you based on your skill set as a quarterback or whatever position it might be, like sort of quarterback in this instance. And then you don't really learn a lot else. The scheme fits the quarterback, and they pick and choose who they want for their colleges based on who fits best. So when you go into the NFL, you've got a really diluted idea of what to expect at that level, and it's hard to not see that in Bryce Young at the moment. He looks nervous, he looks uneasy, he doesn't have the same confidence that he had when he was at the college level. And different coaches, different schemes and everything else, that's not going to help. But he feels like somebody who needs stability, and I'm just not too sure where that's going to come from at the moment. And this is why you have a veteran. You have a veteran to teach a young quarterback and to try and help guide them and give them some level of, again, maybe that stability. But these guys are still professionals. They still want to play. Despite Andy Dalton knowing where his career is at the moment, he still thinks that he can go out there and win games. And so he must be, you can't expect him to just sit there and purely be a mentor. So I think it's the right thing to do in the short term. But if you're so adamant that this guy is the future, he needs games. So it's a really difficult thing to do. It sort of feels like a double-edged sword. You're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't at the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly feeling that way. I mean, this guy's a former number 1 pick, Johnny, isn't he? I mean, he went 2-14 last season, 287 yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. it wasn't pretty viewing last year either. Obviously, under Frank Reich for most of the season, then he was fired, and Chris Tabor came in and replaced him. Obviously, brought in new coach Dave Canales, the former Bucks OC, to be the head coach this year. And I mean, man, on the face of it now, they gave up King's ransom. Obviously, they traded with the Bears up to that number one spot. In reality, they got Bryce Young, but what in reality the Bears got was DJ Moore, a 23rd first round pick, which turns into Darnell Wright, a 2023 second round pick, which turned into the cornerback Tyreek Stevenson. This year's number one pick, which obviously turned into Caleb Williams, even though that seems a bit shaky to begin with, it's still Caleb Williams. I feel like we feel confident that he is going to be a success in this league. And then they've got next year's draft second pick as well. I mean, and at this rate, that could be the 33rd pick, which basically feels like a first round pick, doesn't it? I mean, how much of a miss is this by the Carolina Panthers? Because there was worries about him coming out of college, but I don't think there was this big a worry, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you both made really interesting points. I'm not a huge college follower. I obviously watch games, but the assessment of players deep into the rounds. I'm not aware of those type of players until really into the draft process. So there's always a huge I suppose circled around one or two players in each draft who are going to be there or thereabouts. And Bryce Young was, most people that we saw had him as the number one overall pick. Some people who are probably brave enough to say that they had CJ Stroud over him, but I'm sure that they didn't have Bryce Young lower than perhaps the third or fourth pick. So it's a real miss from everyone, really, because Bryce Young, obviously as talented as we saw him at Alabama, really hasn't worked out. He's a quarterback that's, I think, just overwhelmed by the NFL experience. I don't think we've seen Bryce Young feel comfortable. He's obviously not making those plays. I mean, this weekend, his stat line from this weekend, he completed 18 passes for 84 yards. I mean, that's surely impossible. Like, how I just couldn't believe how this guy, they've added some weapons this year. Okay, when we're not talking about elite players, but it just seems unable to take a risk or doing a deep ball, and when he does try that, obviously we saw him with his last play, sort of jump pass on fourth down, which resulted in which is an awful play. I mean, it's for the sake of business and Carolina. Unfortunately, Dave Canales is already fighting for his job and he's losing his locker room, as we saw with Adam Thielen's outburst on the sidelines, and apparent discontent with his young quarterback. So he had to make this change. He seems a very positive guy to the Canales, particularly from his time at Tampa Bay, and I suppose that atmosphere and team morale is a huge thing for him. Hence why we've seen a change so early. But Bryce Young is probably looking worse than he did. Obviously the bar's very low from last year, but he's already looking like he's regressing. It's unless something drastic changes.
But surely, Johnny, some of the blame has to go on the organisation.
Of course,
no. Surely, because I do feel like it has been very much Bryce Young's just not it. And I would argue that this is exactly what the Carolina Panthers brand has been under David Tepper. Very trigger happy, very keen to move on if it's not working out and going right for him. Not patient. I mean, they've done it with head coaches. They've done it with other quarterbacks. They're doing it to another young quarterback again. I know it was a bit of a quarterback circus before Bryce Young turned up, but the Panthers have got to take some responsibility as an organisation here, surely.
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, we've talked a lot about not, supporting your quarterback, and clearly the Panthers roster was totally inadequate last year. Poor defensive line, which really hampered Young's development. They obviously gave up their number one and probably only asset in terms of offensive weapon in DJ Moore in the trade they gave them. But, this year they've made, I suppose you can say, upgrades with Deontay Johnson, who I'm sure you'll say is a very underrated receiver. Unfortunately, he's not made a difference. Johnson, they brought in a couple of rookie receivers, tried to bolster their offensive line, and I don't know, they look worse this year. And I think Bryce Young has to take some of the blame, obviously, but the Panthers organization from the very top really does stink a little bit. And we've seen that last year in outbursts from the owner. Obviously the fans are very unhappy. I think the entire roster, like I've said, the squad morale is so low. Dave Canales, like I said, I think is a guy who I think people will draw to him, because he seems to be a guy that really feeds off that positive energy, team morale agenda. And I think he had to make this change. Andy Dalton came out today and was absolutely pumped that he had been named the starting quarterback, despite his age, being given this one last chance. Maybe that's a little boost to the team and for the head coach. And they clearly weren't going to get that from Bryce Young, who, like I say, I think is just totally overwhelmed. I'm praying that this isn't his last hoorah, but certainly I think he's going to be done in Carolina. I don't know what they're going to be able to get back for him, but he's surely going to be on the trade block. I think as we enter the rest of the season. It's just an awful situation for Carolina fans, and I think they are looking much worse, and the bar is incredibly low than they were last year, and that's obviously something that we don't want to see.
It's crazy because we're going to later talk about another callback at another team, and it'd be quite hilarious for if I suppose to give too much away, but if something happens with Tua, the Dolphins could be a team that may go in for Bryce Young, might they? I mean, at this point though, it's feeling like his career might turn into being a second stringer unless an opportunity comes along. Players like Mariota have had that opportunity. Minshew have had that opportunity to be that number one at other organizations. I hope that Bryce Young can sort of revitalize himself to be able to, if Panthers doesn't work out, he could maybe go and compete for a starting job somewhere else. So it would be good to see him do that, I think.